What it do is your man Savalas. The SABA checking in with Mark Clark in the Sports Parade Magazine podcast. Y'all go ahead and give him a call at 713-553-6370. Y'all hit me up at Savalas.com. He give it to you straight up with no chaser. Just how I like my yak. Keeping up with the Joneses, so I gotta get paid. Fresh car, hood, ain't got my arms straight.
There's no better way to advertise or hit your target market than with the Sports Parade Magazine Daily Podcast. Call 713-553-6370 for rates. And now, without further ado, the man, my main man, he's a bad man, Mark Clark.
Everybody get up.
Good morning, welcome to another edition of the Sports Parade Magazine podcast. Boy, we're excited to get to it. Today it's going to be the NFL Week 1 in Rewind. And we're going to go over all of the great games. It's kicked off right away with the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens defending Super Bowl champ against the Denver Broncos. Now, this game had to be moved to Denver because normally the Super Bowl champion will open at home, but the game had to be moved because of a scheduling conflict with Major League Baseball. And, how can you blame the Baltimore Orioles? Why would they want to move? They're in contention for a wild card spot and Major League Baseball's playoffs, and, there's always playing second fiddle to the NFL, so they told them no. I think that played part of the reason why they lost this game, but, when you're talking about Week 1 in the NFL, you can't get too excited. You can't get too up, too down. You can't really read too much into it because a lot of times teams are not quite ready for prime time. And when I watched this game, this game was really dominated early on by the Baltimore Ravens. I thought they were in control. I thought on both sides of the ball. I thought Peyton Manning and the Broncos were a little bit out of sync in that first quarter. All of a sudden, Jacoby Jones, who's been everywhere, and I always say, they talk about the Super Bowl hangover, that once you win a Super Bowl, it's extremely difficult to repeat because you're on the chicken dinner banquet circuit. You're dealing with a lot of requests for videos and TV shoots and interviews and Jimmy Kimmel Live or Arsenio Hall Show, all the different talk shows, David Letterman. And you're just dealing with a lot more pressure and a lot less time that you're spending in film study, training, and things of that nature. Where Jacoby Jones could have been a poster boy for that. I mean, he was all over Dancing with the Stars. He was on almost every late night talk show. When he goes back for a punt return and his own player, a rookie, runs into him, wow, strained knee ligaments out indefinitely, maybe up to 4 or 5 weeks. And from that point on, the game took a decidedly different turn. The momentum, everything switched. Not just from that injury, but from a turnover resulting in that injury. Everything switched to Denver's side, and Denver just rolled. Peyton Manning set an NFL record, 7 touchdown passes. But when you look back on Baltimore, they really just fell apart. The key to Baltimore, not really Ray Lewis retiring, even though he's the heart and soul. In this game, the key to me was in the offseason when the decision was made, okay, I understand that they have to give Flacco the money. That's your franchise quarterback. That's who's going to get the biggest dollars on any team. But when they let Anquan Boldin go to San Francisco, and we'll get to that game later in San Francisco, to me that was just crucially a devastating blow because without Anquan Boldin, you have Torrey Smith, who's basically now can be double teamed, can be schemed against, and can be taken away from Joe Flacco as a weapon. You've already lost Dennis Pitta, his safety blanket at tight end. And the people replacing him, like the Ed Dixons of the world, just simply not up to prime time, not up to the level of talent. So now you've become just like you were before you won that Super Bowl, just one-dimensional with Ray Rice. Because Flacco is the type of quarterback that likes to go deep, but when you had Anquan Boldin, he could get that crucial third down catch. He could go across the middle and get that 10, 15 tough yards And he took a lot of heat and made Torrey better maybe than he was. So Torrey could just run those fly patterns and run those deep patterns. And quite frankly, Jacoby Jones, who was going to try to fill in part of the role of Anquan Bolden. But now you take away Anquan, you don't have, because of this injury to Jacoby, now it's really one-dimensional. Torrey was simply not a factor. Flacco likes to throw the ball deep. That didn't happen. He just fell apart. And then Denver just peeled back on that defensive front. And they just pinned their ears back. And they just came at him over and over and over again. And boy, oh boy, it just trickled downhill like an avalanche. And before you know it, they were blown out 49-27. A lot of warning signs to be read in this game. A lot of warning signs, because you don't just replace a talent of Anquan Bolden. You just don't. And he's often overlooked, I think, because a lot of times people want to say, well, he's not the speedster. He's not the Ferrari that, say, an Andre Johnson is. Let's say a Green, AC Green is in Cincinnati. A Des Bryant in Dallas. Julio Jones in Atlanta. Chad. He's not a Chad Johnson. He's not a Megatron in Detroit. No, he's not. He doesn't have that speed. But you know what? He doesn't have to have that speed, because there's no one tougher. No receiver tougher in the NFL than Anquan Bolden. That's a fact. And I think he's often overlooked because he played all those years in Arizona with Larry Fitzgerald. I think people didn't realize the greatness of Anquan Bolden. I think the alarm bells need to be rung loudly, because for this team to collapse the way they did, and not just offensively, let's face it, they gave up 49 points to Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. I know people will say, well, it's Peyton and his greatness. All that is fine. But any NFL team, any defense that wants to be considered serious, if you're giving up 49 points, particularly in the opening game, not a good sign. Okay, we're going to move on. And remember, follow me at Mark's Word or at Sports Parade Mag. At Mark's Word or at Sports Parade Mag. Or email me, Mark Clark at sportsparademagazine.com. And remember, the Sports Parade Magazine podcast is the fastest growing sports podcast in the country, with now over 43,000 listeners. And to top it off, we're going to have a sneak peek soon that we will be nationwide on some local radio stations and some local, we'll tease that and let that hang a little bit while. But that's something that's going to be coming over the next few months, and we'll be talking about that. Great news for the Sports Parade Magazine's podcast and all of the wonderful, wonderful sponsors. So let's move around the NFL. The Tennessee Titans won their first game of the year, beating division rival Pittsburgh 16-9. Man, I tell you what, Pittsburgh's such a storied franchise. Such a franchise with the ownership that just gets it right. They understand that you have to hold on to coaches for long periods of time, that you can't have constant upheaval. But this is a classic example of when you let a franchise simply get too old. James Harrison obviously was let go in the offseason. They tried to make a youth movement, but Troy Polamalu and all those great Steelers defenses are just simply long in the tooth. Mike Wallace took the money grab and went to Miami. Antonio Brown really is taking over that number one receiver spot, but he's more of a possession type receiver, as well as Emmanuel Sanders is moving into Antonio Brown's number two spot. But Big Ben just doesn't have anything. Le'Veon Bell was hurt with the foot, the rookie wide receiver that was supposed to do something. He's going to come back sooner rather than later, but still, you lost All-Pro Marquise Pouncey at center with a torn MCL and ACL. Devastating for a line that was challenged anyway to protect Big Ben. Big Ben has taken a hell of a beating the past two seasons, in which your focal point, probably the best player on your team, and Pouncey now gone after this first game. It's going to be a huge struggle. I mean, let's just take a look at it. Tennessee, 69 points. They only got 9 points on Tennessee. And a lot of people point to ex-Saint Pariah, Greg Williams of the Bounty Gate of the snitch, who snitched out his own players to the league. as the reason that Tennessee defense is so much improved from last year. And I think there's some merits that I never did doubt or deny that he is an excellent defensive coordinator. But let's face it, it wasn't going to be hard. It's going to be a struggle when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers because offensively they just don't have any weapons at all. When you have no deep threats and just possession receivers, you don't have a great tight end in Heath Miller. You have no running backs. They cut Jonathan Dwyer before the season started when he was supposed to be with Isaac Redmond battling for a spot. They had to bring him back. That's how bad the situation has gotten just at the running back position. So they're going to be extremely challenged. As for Tennessee, I'm not going to get excited about Tennessee. Chris Johnson had an okay game, and but the whole situation with Tennessee is they don't have enough offensive weapons and that dominating of a defense to make a run this year. But hey, will remain to be seen. The biggest upset, if you want to call it, Jets, Jets, the New York Jets lost. Whether they beat the Tampa Bay Bucks, New Orleans Saints division rival, next opponent, 18-17. Now, what was funny about this is, if you play fantasy football, everybody picked up, at least I did, Tampa Bay's defense because you knew the Jets were a mess. We've gone over it on the Sports Parade Magazine podcast of how just dysfunctional the Jets organization is, from Mark Sanchez getting this huge contract to next thing you know, leaving him in the game in the fourth quarter of a preseason game to having his shoulder almost ripped apart by an opponent that probably was not in the league today. Didn't make the final cut, and you said, who's going to play? Then they had Geno Smith. Geno Smith had a horrific preseason, running out the back of the end zone, not knowing where he was, throwing interceptions. On top of that, he had a knee injury. But some kind of way, they put him out there to start, and the kid did an admirable job. But let's just say this about Tampa Bay. If it wasn't for the incompetence of Tampa Bay, there's no way the Jets win this game. The game is over. It's done. Geno Smith is scrambling on the last play of the game, and he runs for about 14, 15 yards, and he's stepping out of bounds. Once he does that, the game's over. They're out of field goal range. There's nothing that can be done. Tampa Bay defender hits him out of bounds. Tack on another 15 yards, give him a chance at a long last-second field goal. Boom! The Jets win. But Tampa Bay, yes, you have Doug Martin, but if you don't open up enough holes for Doug Martin, and if you can't get performance out of your quarterback, Josh Freeman, and let me just say this, you keep having this tag on you of potential. Josh Freeman, after 3 or 4 years, the potential label is gone. You're going to be labeled a failure and a bust. And quite frankly, I don't understand what Tampa Bay is doing. They spent a lot of money, and they traded for Revis Island, and they're trying to upgrade their defense. And that's all good and well, but you should be concentrating on what you're going to do with the franchise, the focal point, your quarterback, your franchise player. Because you got Vincent Jackson that you gave a boatload of money to. You had this dynamic last year offensive rookie of the year in Doug Martin. So you have those two keys. Then you have Mike Williams, a great possession receiver. So you have all these keys, all these factors that line up for a great offense, but it simply doesn't materialize because at the head, you don't have the quarterback you need. But they go into an offseason, give him another chance, but then are you really giving him a chance when you strip him of being a captain? You take the C off his jersey. What message does that send to the rest of the players? What message does that send to Josh Freeman? If you really think that he's not the man and he hasn't played up to it, hey, move on, cut bait. Find that quarterback. Find that focal point, that franchise player that can take you to the next level. They didn't do it. And he looked terrible. Quite frankly, there's too many weapons on that offense, and the Jets are not that good defensively for them to only put up 17 points. If you put up 17 points against any NFL defense, you simply are a bad offense. Tampa Bay, I hope you don't get it together next week because we play the Saints. So but they're going to struggle this year. I don't see some of the people that were saying they're going to be in the playoffs or contending in the NFC South. I simply don't do it. And what may be the worst team in the league, the Jacksonville Jaguars, lost 28-2 to Andy Reid's Kansas City Chiefs. 28-2. They got a safety. They were shut out. Do you realize how putrid you have to be to go through an entire NFL game and not even get in field goal positions? You haven't crossed the 40-yard line. You have not crossed the 40-yard line. In the background you may hear, as I do the sports podcast and as I do my research, NFL Sunday Ticket is fantastic. With the package, there's many different options that you can do. You can order actually game film and be able to review some of the different angles, 4 or 5 different angles of a game, to be able to, if you want to concentrate on who missed a block, who made a block, who didn't hit the gap, or how the defense is playing, how the offense is playing, how a particular player is playing. You also have what they call the whole game, the highlights in a capsule of about 30 minutes, so you can catch up around the league, and that's what's playing in the background. And when you looked at Kansas City and Jacksonville, there's literally nothing. There's nothing. Blaine Gabbert cannot play in this league. They invested a number 1 pick. It's the same thing we always said. Why do NFL teams feel the need to justify a decision they made that is simply wrong? I don't understand it. You're just hamstringing yourself into the future by not cutting bait. Sometimes when you made a mistake, you made a mistake. It's time to move on. Speaking of which, Mark Ingram of the Saints. We'll get to that later. That's another example of a team not realizing, not admitting that, guess what? He simply can't cut. Now, another good game was the Oakland Raiders. They lost 17-21 to the Colts on the road. But let me tell you, Terrell Pryor did a yeoman's-like work as starting quarterback. And a lot of people laughed at him and say he doesn't have the arm strength. He's not an NFL quarterback, and things of that nature. And all that may be true and have some merit. But he was able to scramble. He got over 50 yards running, and he had this team poised for a comeback, but time ran out on him. So he had them in a position to take a shot at the win against a Colts team that's very good defensively, very well coached. And let me just say this. On the road, we know the history of West Coast teams coming to the East Coast. They don't usually do well. But to hold the Colts to 21 points and Andrew Luck, a team that's dynamic offensive-wise with New Orleans wide receiver native Reggie Wayne, that's a borderline Hall of Fame player. T.Y. Hilton, a lot of great players on that team. I think they did a great job, and maybe this bodes well that you're going to be able to see the future of the Oakland Raiders turn around, because that would be good for the league. The Colts, it remains to be seen. 21 points against the Raiders. Your first impression is to say, that's a warning sign. That's a red flag. But as I said, we're not going to get too up or too down on that first game of the year. And the game I'm watching right now as I do the podcast, Minnesota Vikings lost 24-34. Let me just say, AP is a beast. I think AP will go down as the all-time greatest running back in the history of the NFL. That's a mouthful. That's debatable. That's arguable. But anytime this guy can come back less than 9 months last year after ACL to almost break the single-season rushing record of 2,000 yards, something no player in the history, given that injury, has come back from to perform at that level, then we've gone over the record of people that have approached 2,000 yards in the NFL at the running back position. The next year, they always come back down to earth, and they barely manage 1,200 yards the following year. First play of the game, first play of the season, AP goes 73 yards for a touchdown, and they were still huffing and puffing, defensive backs, much smaller and much quicker, trying to catch up to him because he was in the back of the end zone before he was even touched. This is simply somebody that's on a different level, y'all. That's a bad, bad boy. He outran the entire team. He's just a beast. It's just so sad that he's surrounded by nothing, a whole lot of nothing. Greg Jennings, long in the tooth, overrated, was a product of a system in Green Bay playing with Aaron Rodgers. He's at the wide receiver spot, and they don't have anything else. They have AP, and that's it. Christian Ponder cannot play, just like Blaine Gabbert in Jacksonville. Christian Ponder has no business being the NFL starting quarterback. And it's sad that you're wasting all of the years, the youth, the greatness of an AP. Let's flip it over to Detroit. Very impressive, because last year it was Megatron, and a whole lot of Megatron. And you said, wow, they need something else. Well, they got it. An ex-Saint and Miami Dolphin, Reggie Bush. Almost 200 all-purpose yards. Almost 200. And, for good measure, 80-yard touchdown catch and run, where he looked like the Reggie of USC. But with Reggie, as we remember in the Saints games, and we remember at part of the last season with Miami, it's always the injury factor. Will he hold up? Can he take the pounding? Never been a question of the talent, the speed, the nightmarish mismatch that he makes for opposing defensive coordinators, because there's no linebacker in the league that can cover him. And he's on par. You need a cornerback to cover him out the backfield, because even a safety is not going to be able to keep up with him. So, but they look good. Detroit looked very, very good. Calvin Johnson was kind of kept in check, but it's always going to be, if Matthew Stafford, another one, it's always, if he can stay healthy and he can play and be more of a manager than a guy that's always trying to force things and tends to throw too many interceptions. If you can do that, and you can keep Reggie Bush upright with that defense, even though they were shredded by AP, which just about every team is, they have a very good shot going forward. Seattle Seahawks beat another division rival, the Carolina Panthers of the Saints. Carolina Panthers 12-7. Seahawks just a tough defense. Probably one of the best in the league next to San Francisco, and some could argue maybe even better, even though they don't have the glamour of San Francisco's defense. The warning signs in this game: 12 points against the Panthers. This is not the San Francisco 49ers. This is they're okay. They're not all that in a bag of chips. Seattle, Russell Wilson, they struggled offensive-wise, because you already have Marcel Lynch, and you're saying, hey, but Sidney Rice, another number one wide receiver, I think for Seattle that's overrated. Didn't think he did a whole lot in Minnesota. Came over last year. I think he's kind of overrated. Golden Tate, number 2 receiver. More of a possession type guy. Nothing that's going to be game breaking. So it's going to be a whole lot of Russell Wilson and Marcel Lynch. But you got to do better than 12 points. 12 points just doesn't cut it. One touchdown, and a couple of field goals. Carolina, just an organization that is a complete and utter mess. You have Cam Newton, and that's about it. You don't have anything else. When they signed a few years ago, when they gave almost $100 million combined to D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, it was just like crazy, because neither one of those guys have really proven that they're number one for a season. So now you have Stewart, who had bad ankles that had to have ankle surgery. He's out for a while. And you're moving in D'Angelo Williams, who supposedly has the burst and the speed and the talent, but has never really showed it. And he's on the wrong side of 30. And what happens? You get a whole lot of nothing. And very disappointing. Cam Newton barely over 120 combined yards. Hardly anything passing. Steve Smith was a great overachiever throughout the years. Fantastic wide receiver. Hey, when you get to be 34, 35, there's only so much life left in you. So that's something that I have to really it's something to be of concern. Elsewhere around the league, the Miami Dolphins beat the hopeless, hapless Cleveland Browns 23-10. What can you say about Cleveland? It's just year after year after year of futility. Eventually, they're going to have to break through, but is it going to be with Brandon Weeden? Is that going to be the answer? Is that going to be the answer that's going to right that ship? You have the great running back, in Trent Richardson, but Trent can't do it all by himself. I'll tell you what keeps them in just about every game is cornerback Joe Hayden. He shuts down one side of the field. They talk about Revis Island. Joe Hayden, I'm telling you right now on the Sports Parade Magazine podcast, Joe Hayden is the best cornerback in this league. Teams simply will not go anywhere near whoever he's covering. Case in point, the Miami Dolphins' number one wide receiver who they gave a ton of money to, Mike Wallace, another New Orleans native. Boom, shut out completely. Nothing. Then he had the nerve enough to get in post-game interviews kind of insinuating around, beating around the bush that the problem is with Tannehill, his quarterback, and the coaching staff. Well, you know what? You knew Ryan Tannehill was not any kind of great shakes at quarterback when you took that money run. You can't have it both ways. You took the money, you ran from Pittsburgh, now deal with it. They came across the victory 23-10. That should have been enough for you to keep your mouth shut and be glad, because it shows the nature of yourself that you're still worried about what you didn't do, what you didn't get, even though the team won. So he was shut out by Joe Hayden, and the only thing that's going to keep Cleveland in the games is if they have dominant performances every week by that offensive line and Trent Richardson. And Joe Hayden is able just to completely shut down one side of the field. And if you don't have a good second and third receiver, you can make life very difficult. But still, with that said, it's going to be hard to imagine Cleveland surpassing 6 wins maybe, 6, 7 wins maybe, with that defense that they have. And also with Joe Hayden, which is they may get that first win in Baltimore, may be starting the season 0-2 next week, as we delve in another podcast to come this week. But Joe Hayden shutting down the Ravens next week, Torrey Smith, and they don't have a number 2 receiver, or number 3 receiver, and no other weapons other than Ray Rice. It could be a long 2 opening weeks for the Baltimore Ravens. As for the Dolphins, you're not going to go far with Ryan Tannehill. That's just, you have the rookie Lamar Miller, and they got little glimpses of him briefly, but you're not going to go far with what you have set up. And spending money on a top flight receiver in Mike Wallace, a deep threat, a guy that's really not a possession type receiver or route runner, just simply a deep bomb type thing, and you're doing it with a quarterback that doesn't throw the ball long very well. Mike Wallace would have been better suited with a team with a quarterback like Joe Flacco that likes to go deep. Tannehill is a guy that's going underneath. He's a quarterback that's going to be going to his tight end a lot, and he's going to be going across the middle to his slot receiver. That's the type of quarterback. So once again, we talk about the administrations and the organizations simply not set up for prime time. The Patriots, I tell you what you say. You can say everything about the losses, about Hernandez in jail, about Gronk recovering from back surgery and the second broken forearm. But some kind of way, Tom Brady and company get it done. They beat the Bills 23-21. Another game in which a rookie quarterback for Buffalo, E.J. Manuel, gave the Buffalo Bills hope for the future, because Manuel, he did a fantastic job, just like Geno Smith did in New York. He was able to control the ball flight. He was accurate. He didn't make the bad decisions. He didn't throw a lot of he didn't throw the interceptions. He didn't put his team in a position where they couldn't win. What was alarming was that C.J. Spiller, who had moved up on a lot of people's talk and the hot list, and he was going to be this firecracker. He was going to be a guy that maybe would have 2,000 all-purpose yards or would have 1,500 yards rushing. But when you come out the box and you fumble in C.J. Spiller, and you already have a history of being injured, it does not bode well. It reminds me of a Ryan Matthews type with all this potential and hype for 2 or 3 years, but it never seems to come to the table. How are you not prepared going into the first game of the year and you come out on the first possession and you fumble and put your team in a bad situation? And the coaching staff agreed because they put in Fred Jackson. Fred's coming off the knee surgery. And then you talked about Fred Jackson, who's about 33 years old. That is ancient for a running back. But that showed just how little confidence they had in C.J. Spiller. But going forward, if they're going to do anything and help this rookie E.J. Manuel progress, and he has the potential to be like a potential Rookie of the Year candidate in E.J. Manuel if everything goes well, you're going to have the talent of the C.J. Spiller and a commitment from him to protect that ball more and do what he needs to do. If that happens, no telling how far they'll go, and they still have a great wide receiver in Buffalo in Stevie Johnson, particularly going deep, and that's a pass that Manuel throws beautifully. As for the Patriots, they're the Patriots, but still so many warning flags. They signed Danny Amendola in the offseason. The history in St. Louis, he's supposed to be the guy that replaces Wes Welker, who went to Denver and, by the way, lit it up with Peyton Manning with those 7 touchdowns. But he's already hurt. Coming into the season, they were saying, well, the groin is hurt and this and that. This is before they have any actual contact. After this game, he's listed as doubtful in the Patriots game coming up. Listed as doubtful. Not a good sign. Then you had the big knock when you talked about the Patriots, where you're talking about the running backs. You said Stephen Ridley, ex-LSU Tiger. You know, he's a terrific talent. He's a guy that could get you 1,700 yards running. But he opens up the season again like C.J. Spiller, fumbling. And you're dealing with an old school coach, a legendary coach, a Hall of Famer coach in Bill Belichick. He's simply not going to go for it. So what happens? He puts the backup in, Shane Vereen, the third down back. Shane Vereen goes off. He just lights it up. He lights it up catching the ball. He lights it up running. But late after the game was over, it was announced that he has to have wrist surgery for a fractured wrist, and that he will be gone for 4 to 5 weeks. So now you're going to be forced, in Bill Belichick, to go back to Stephen Ridley. But to tell you what, he better hold on to that ball, because Belichick is the type of coach that even if it hurts him, he'll put Ridley on the bench. But you keep taking away the weapons from Belichick and Brady, and you wonder just how far this train, this dynasty, this great tradition can go when you keep losing all the players. Now, there's a question mark of whether Gronk can come back, not this week, but maybe the second week. But part of the reason why this game was so close against a Buffalo Bills team that is inferior in talent is because Gronk at 6'7" and 260, such a big target, such a big window, particularly in the red zone. And when you drop him back and you're Tom Brady, and you're looking in these small windows that NFL quarterback has to hit, what would you rather be looking through? A little tiny window? A little tiny window of a smallest receiver? Or Gronk at 6'8"? That's why he didn't have those big windows. That's why you saw more field goals in this game, and you didn't get to see the touchdowns and the prolific offense that you're used to in the Patriots. And it's only going to be worse now that Shane Vereen gone for at least a month, maybe a month and a half. And now you have a situation where Danny Amendola, you don't know how long this kid has never played, I think, more than 3 or 4 games without getting hurt, which made me wonder, why would they give him the money? Elsewhere, the Rams' last-second field goal beat the hopeless and the hapless Arizona Cardinals 27-24. What do I think about this game? You know, a lot has been said. Carson Palmer is a sleeper. He's a sleeper, particularly in fantasy leagues. He's a sleeper in Arizona. Well, you know, he's going to make Larry Fitzgerald come back to life after being in purgatory with these quarterbacks that couldn't get him the ball. And Fitzgerald had a big game, and Carson Palmer threw for a lot of yards. But let's face it, there's no running in Arizona. If you're counting on Rashard Mendenhall, you're in trouble. I think as the season goes on, it's going to be a situation in Arizona, where it's going to be garbage time, where you see Carson Palmer getting a lot of points. And Carson Palmer, I don't think was in any great shakes since his days at Cincinnati. I think he's on the downside of his career. I still think he has the talents of being an NFL quarterback, but but he's not a top 15 NFL quarterback. And I think that will play out as the season goes on, particularly with no running game. It will be very, very easy to defend, even in this rules that have changed that are against the defense so much in terms of what they can do and not do. It's going to be hard-pressed for me to see Arizona rising anywhere. For the Rams, so many young players like wide receiver Chris Givens. Just remains to be seen. Can they finally put it together? Can Bradford fulfill the money? And Bradford was that last generation of quarterbacks that got the super money before they took it down $30 or $40 million in terms of guaranteed money. He's the last of that breed of drafted players that were guaranteed like almost $100 million. So there's so much invested in Sam Bradford, so much invested, and you wonder, will he be able to fulfill that destiny? That remains to be seen if they can put it together as a team. They have some great defensive linemen. They're able to put on some heat, great fan support, but still, it remains to be seen, will it be done? Sunday, Green Bay Packers, San Francisco 49ers, rewind, same result, 34-28 San Francisco. Let me just say a few things about this. Green Bay, they're constantly saying Green Bay's defense is better. For about 2 or 3 years, I've been hearing about Green Bay's defense is better. No, it's not. Green Bay does not have a good defense. They do not have a top 10 defense in this league. Let's flip it over to San Francisco. So much has been made, and rightfully so. This great defense of the 49ers. I mean, they're stacked. They're stacked on the defensive line. They're stacked in the linebacker core with guys like Patrick Willis, and they're stacked in the defensive backfield. But wait, they still gave up 28 points. I don't care how prolific your offense is, and it's pretty prolific with Green Bay, with Aaron Rodgers, but still, you're giving up 28 points. If you're such a stout defense, if you're the defense that's going to shut things down, the defense of the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, of the steel curtain of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we go on and on with those type of analogies, you don't give up 28 points and almost lose the game and have people driving down to beat you. So maybe there are some chinks and some kinks in that armor. San Francisco, great win, but, I still say this league is not made for running quarterbacks. I don't care how young and great and dynamic Colin Kaepernick is, and how great his arm is, and that he's bigger than a Michael Vick, per se, or RG3. At the end of the day, if they nail enough heat, enough licks on him, he's going to come back down to earth, because they all do. RG3 had to come back down sooner rather than later. Michael Vick a little bit later rather than sooner. But at the end of the day, you cannot make it in this league running. And despite the fact that Anquan Bolden just was spectacular, I think close to 200 yards and almost 15, 16 receptions and the touchdowns, he's the only, other than Vernon Davis at tight end, the only offensive wide receiver threat on that team. For the life of me, it reminded me of the Saints when we lost 2 years ago to San Francisco in the playoffs. Why would you let Vernon Davis beat you? That would be the last player that I would let beat me. Let's flip it to Anquan Bolden. And the team going forward, you think that during this game, Green Bay had such a great defense that the coaching staff would say, we're not letting Bolden beat us. They have no other wide receivers. Nobody. It's done, son. They have nobody to throw to. So why would you let this guy beat you? That's just like odd to me. He'd have been double teamed. If I had to triple team him, he would not have gotten a sniff, because Frank Gore is still steady, but I still think Frank Gore has a little age and years on him, and I wonder if he can hold up or keep up the current production. So let's see what happens with San Francisco going forward in the first 6 or 7 games. Let's see if teams start to put a little bit of heat, put a little mustard, let him feel those hits when he runs that ball like Michael Vick. As for Green Bay, you still have the same problem that you have for years and years. Even though you have Eddie Lacy as a rookie running back and you try to run the ball, it hasn't been that impressive running the ball. And basically, it's just Aaron Rodgers running around scrambling and heaving it downfield. And while he has a wide array of weapons, like Jordan Nelson, like Jones, to me, it just seems that there's something missing in Green Bay. And I don't think that they're ready to make a run at a Super Bowl. Sunday Night Football. The New York Giants lost 31-36 to how about them Cowboys? What do I think about these two teams? I'm going to tell you, not much. Let me tell you, Romo took a beating. I thought he had some broken ribs, and even though they say the x-rays or the MRIs were negative, sometimes it can be little small hairline fractures or maybe not showing up because the pain that he was in makes you wonder, how could it just be a case of something being bruised? But going back to the Cowboys, even though they won this game, did not look impressive. We keep hearing about how prolific the offense should be with DeMarco Murray, with Dez Bryant. Well, Dez did nothing. Dez was non-existent, non-factor, and then it looks like he pulled up hurt. And he tends to still be childish and be a distraction on the sideline when things aren't going. At the end of the day, no matter how many hundreds and almost 400 yards Tony Romo throws for, he still kept going basically to his friend, his best man, his partner, the tight end, Jason Witten. That's always his safety blanket. But at the end of the day, with DeMarco Murray not putting up big yards, how far can you go as a defense? Because a lot of those yards and points that Dallas is getting done in garbage time. It's getting done in garbage time. So, what can you say? As for the Giants, you got deep problems. You got David Wilson, a second-year player. He's the man. Andre Brown went down in another preseason incident, just like Mark Sanchez. Shouldn't have been in the game, broke leg. He's gone. If he comes back week 12, 13, 14, the season's over. You have nobody. Last year as a rookie, they thought Wilson would challenge then Ahmad Bradshaw. But guess what? He fumbled that ball. Tom Coughlin, old school coach, just like I said about Belichick with Stephen Riley, or just like I said in Buffalo with C.J. Spiller. Fumbles the ball, David Wilson. Not only once, he fumbles it twice. Twice on the first two possessions, including one when they had a chance to go all the way down. They had a chance to score, and he fumbles. He puts the ball on the turf. He basically lost this game for the Giants. He lost this game. You're talking about a 5-point difference, and he's fumbling twice, including in the red zone. He lost this game. Did not see the light of day again on the field. They had a backup in there that really is not cut out to be in the league. But he put him in there because Tom Coughlin is old school, and he's not going to put up with the foolishness of turnovers. Eli Manning, by far, did not play a good game. But even with that said, he had them in a position to win the game. They're driving down the field, trying to get a shot at a last-second touchdown to beat the Cowboys. He hits this backup receiver who should be wrangling baskets at Walmart rather than being an NFL running back. And it goes through his hands, tip drill, boom, to the Dallas Cowboys. Game, set, match. Game, set, match to the Cowboys. How far can you go? Coughlin's going to have to put David Wilson back in there. But once again, as we talked about these other players, when will you learn to hold on to the damn ball? Monday night, Washington Redskins lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 33-27. Two things about this game. Philadelphia ran the most offensive plays since 1997, I think, the Minnesota Vikings. And one quarter in particular, they ran more plays than had ever been run in NFL history. A product of what? The Chip Kelly college offense. Don't give him a chance to rest. Just hit him. Only problem with that is your player's getting hit, Chip. Michael Vick took a beating. Michael Vick ain't the youngster that he once was. He doesn't spring back up from those hits. He's like starts to get up and he's like grabbing his knees and his ankle and his groin. He will not last. It's a question mark whether Michael Vick can last on a regular offense, let alone where he's running more plays and taking more hits. I don't see it. LaShawn McCoy, once again, terrific as always, but Once again, a guy that tends to get injured. How is he going to keep up with that pace? Same thing for Deshaun Jackson, all of your offensive weapons. These are little bitty guys. These are not big guys. They're not cut out for this business. They're not built for it. But they got the win. Washington Redskins, let me tell you, RG3, y'all in trouble. Y'all are in trouble. He did not look good. He looked stiff. And people said, well, he scrambled and got about 30 yards or so, or 15, 20 yards and went out of bounds. He just simply not look. He looked the knee brace. He just looks bulky on him. He does not seem confident. Part of that had to do with the fact that he didn't play at all in the preseason as they were trying to protect him from getting hit. But when you don't play at all and you have no rhythm, no time, and no practice, it's extremely hard. Probably the most difficult of any position, the quarterback position. And when your number one threat, really your only offensive threat besides Alfred Morris is Pierre Garçon, and he basically was a non-factor, it's going to be a long, long year. One can only hope as a Redskin fan that what you're seeing is a process during the season of him getting better and better as he shakes off the rust and gets a little bit limber. But right now, I think he's kind of a little bit shell-shocked, despite all the bravado, despite all of the talk that he's ready to go and he could have gone in preseason. When you watched him in slow motion, when you watched RG3 even drop back and throw that ball, what you saw a lot of times was a quarterback that was rushing throws because he felt the pressure. He wasn't willing to take that extra hit, that extra millisecond to set his feet, put everything into the ball properly, and get the ball on target. What happened? As a result, you saw balls that were thrown on the ground, balls that were thrown behind receivers, and balls that were thrown over the heads of receiver. Not very accurate, and guess what? You're not going to win a lot of games like that. But like I said, Philadelphia, don't get excited. That offense of Chip Kelly with a play a second, a play every 15 seconds or whatever it is, these guys are not going to last long. I don't think any NFL team or player can, because these guys take a tremendous amount of abuse, and there's so much talent, so much speed, so much strength, so much bulk in the NFL. College coaches simply don't get it. It doesn't work in the NFL. So we'll remain to be seen, because if it's week 3 or week 4 and you got 3 or 4 guys on the injury reserve and all of a sudden you're going to Nick Folk as your quarterback, guess what? You're going to find out quick, baby. This is not, I repeat, the NCAA. This is not college football. Rounding out, the Texans, the wannabe Super Bowl champs, as they feel like they've been Super Bowl champs for 2 years. 31-28. 31-28. They beat the hapless San Diego Chargers. And for a minute there, I thought San Diego had made a little change. Phillip Rivers looked like the Phillip Rivers of 3 years ago. And they had like a big lead. I think they were up 28-7. Never scored another point. For the life of me, I don't know why you didn't go back to Ryan Matthews. They kept running in Ronnie Brown. Ronnie Brown, what does Ronnie Brown? Had about 7 surgeries on his knees, and he's about 35 years old. And you running Ronnie Brown? Are you alternating Ryan Matthews, a youngster, relatively speaking, 28 years old, superstar type talent, despite the fumbles, despite the getting injured? But you're gonna alternate with Ronnie Brown, and when you're behind, you're putting Ronnie Brown in there? Really? Oof, that's deep. That's deep. Sometimes you have to put your pride aside and say, I got to go with my studs. Win, lose, or draw. I'm going to go out on my sword. And I don't think San Diego did that at all. They just collapsed. And you can tell bad teams. You know what happens with a bad team? Bad teams, when they get down, you know what happens? They stay down like a dog, like the dogs they are. They start looking around. Oh, Lord, here it comes. Here it comes. We're about to lose again. That's what happens. That's what happens when you go up against a team that has a losing mindset. San Diego, you're going nowhere soon. You're a bunch of wannabes that are old in the tooth, has-beens that never were. As for the Texans, don't get excited, baby. Don't get excited at all, because if you drop down 28-7 and have to really have a fourth quarter miracle comeback to beat them, it does not bode well for you being a Super Bowl champion. You better get it together, tighten it up. And guess what? Same thing as we were talking about San Francisco with Colin Kaepernick and the one targeted wide receiver, Anquan Bolden. If you take Andre Johnson away, it's the same thing. What was San Diego defensive wise thinking by constantly letting Andre Johnson beat him? He beat the hell out of him just like 2 weeks ago he did to Saints in a preseason game. Over and over, almost to the tune of 200 yards. Eventually you think somebody would say, hey, maybe we should double that guy or triple him. Shut him down. Make somebody else beat us. Make DeAndre Hopkins, make this rookie wide receiver beat us. Make somebody else. As for the running back, we've heard all the rumors about Aaron Foster. About, is he hurt? Is there too many 250 plus attempts over the last 3 years? Has it taken a toll? And he had bursts. He still has a little burst and still has some moves. I don't think he looked comfortable to me. And I don't know whether they're hiding the injury with Aaron Foster or not. Aaron Foster, at least in that first game, maybe because he didn't get any preseason like RG3, needs to shake the rust off. He simply did not look good. Because in their defense, like RG3, it's extremely difficult to mimic live bullets. And that's what a real game is. And when you don't play in preseason and don't get hit and don't, the subtle nuances of going through the back as a hitting a certain gap or hole, it takes time to get used to that. But he didn't look that good. Ben Tate, the backup, had a third of the carries, but almost surpassed the yardage that Aaron Foster had. So while it's great for the depth of the overall team, it does not bode well early on for them making a run at the Super Bowl. And I know they like to think of themselves as Super Bowl contenders, just like the game I'm watching now. The Atlanta Falcons, that's right, the Saints put the beat down on them. They put the hurt on them. They put the beat down on them big time, 23-17. And as I broke down earlier that morning on WYLD FM 98 Sunday Morning Journal in New Orleans with Hal Clark, as I broke it down, I said, Atlanta is a team that likes to find shine in the race cars, meaning they like that greatness in a Julio Jones and the dynamic nature of a Steven Jackson. But at the end of the day, guess what? It didn't work out for them because they forgot about the nuts and bolts. And when I say the nuts and bolts, the guts of anything, I'm talking about what? I'm talking about the offensive and defensive line. And yeah, they got O.C. Umenyiora, which I don't think is going to be a great upgrade over John Abraham. And we remain to be seen whether at his age and his history of injury, whether he's able to sustain the type of play and the type of heat that he gets on the quarterback. But back to that offensive line. We talked about Lamar Holmes. We said this guy had only played one game in the NFL last year at right tackle. Now he was the unquestioned starter. And Peter Kotz, even though he played a year at right guard, he was going to be the center now. He was going to be your quarterback at offensive line. I said this should bode well. First game against the Saints, division rival. That Dome Garden Stadium, they should be able to put a tremendous amount of heat on the Atlanta Falcons. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. They beat the hell out of Matty Ice. They put heat on them over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, Kenneth Vaccaro, rookie safety out of Texas, he had two key plays in this contest. One was a late hit on a scrambling Matty Ice that kind of early on set the tone that, he was a little bit shook up, a little bit hurt, and he knew that they weren't playing with him, and he kind of had that in the back of his mind. Then, on the last play of the game, when it's win or go home, and they had a chance, Atlanta, to beat the Saints, what happened? The little things creeped in the back of their head. We don't beat Sean Payton. We don't beat the Saints. And if you don't like it, Falcon fans, lump it. That's just a fact, baby. That's a fact. When you've won 9 out of 13 contests under Sean Payton, the Saints are beaten. That's the record of the Saints against the Falcons. That tells me what? You have the Saints in your mind that you can't beat them. Whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, whatever. You can see the heads drop of a Roddy White who played with a high ankle sprain. You can see the heads drop of a Julio Jones. You can see Tony Gonzalez. You can see Matty Ice. You could see it. And our own Ty Green, special correspondent for the Sports Parade magazine, he went into the locker room and he talked to Kenny Vaccaro. I want to hear a few things about that late hit on Matty Ice, about the last-second defense of Tony Gonzalez's pass, which resulted in an interception that clutched and clinched the game for the Saints, and about his first game in the league.
We knew who their targets were. We knew Tony was a big red zone guy, and I just knew I just had to make that play. I was in the middle and just went up, tipped it.
What's Rob like as a coach?
Great. He's the players' coach. Let's just fly around. Let's just do our thing. He says players make the scheme. The scheme doesn't make the players. So that's one of his big emphasis. So he lets us do what we want.
Kenny, when you were drafted, they said you were drafted specifically to defend Tony Gonzalez, and it's almost like a dream come true, and you make the big play.
I don't know if I was ever particularly to lock down one person, but I think they recognize that I have coverage skills since I played nickel in college. But ultimately, Rob uses me in a lot of different ways, and I just do what I can for the team.
On the hit to the quarterback,
that was my kind of rookie walk. Cause I told Rob, I was like, in college it's a little bit more flexible, but I understand in the league you can't do that, and that won't happen again. I just want to get a little lick on him to kind of set the tone a little bit, but quarterback slide.
Marcus Colston is releasing. He's trying to run stride for stride with a receiver with his back turned.
I think
That is
that's
such
pretty
a
good.
huge advantage to the Saints. And a
Game wasn't fast for me. I prepared well. It was smooth, man. I didn't feel like a rookie.
Once again, that was our special correspondents in the locker room right after the game, Ty Green for Sports Parade magazine, interviewing Kenny Vaccaro, the rookie who paid dividends. One of the few times we've had a defensive player that we've drafted, because it's normally all on the offensive side of the ball, that made a key play, made a couple of key plays. And, if you got to get a late hit, and it's on a quarterback, and he'll be fine, and, put your team in a bad situation. But that hit, when Matty Ice was sliding, that Kenny Vaccaro laid to his ribs and his side, it shook up and changed the dynamics of Matty Ice from that point forward. He still put up a lot of yards and is still connected with Julio and still connected with Gonzalez, but he felt that heat. That, along with that tremendous pass rush, we talked about it. Gillette, Cameron Jordan, who I think could be a Pro Bowler this year, even though we did lose 2 defensive tackles, Bunkley and a backup. That defense played hellified, and for a defense that was absolutely shredded, destroyed last year, for them to come out and play the way they did, even though it's the first game, that speaks volumes about what they were able to do in terms of the switch to the 3 floor, in terms of Ryan, in terms of all the injuries that occurred, of guys they were counting on to play in that 3 floor, particularly at the linebacker position. I think it was tremendous. The only negative I'll say about this game, man, I'm sorry. Why do you keep feeding this ball to Mark Ingram? I don't understand. You got a dynamic rookie wide receiver in Kenneth Stills, who has that deep threat. You have Pierre Thomas, who is just pound for pound a tough guy. Maybe don't have the talent level, but just tough, the best running back. Just like we said about the Blaine Gabberts of the world, the Christian Pounders of the world. Why do NFL executives and coaches and teams feel the need to justify making a guy number 1 pick? If you made a mistake, you made a mistake. And sometimes it's time to move forward. And I think they'd be better served having Pierre as the first down back. If you want to put Lil Darren Sproles in there, sometimes on second, but most on third down, that's fine. I would rather see Cadet come in and do the damage and back up Pierre. That's the way I'd rather see it. I'd have Mark Ingram as my third down running back. He has shown nothing in the league, and to me, he's a distraction because every time he has a run and it amounts to nothing or 2 yards, he's jumping up and he's pounding the ball and he's hitting his chest. For what? For what? It's funny how when you're bad, stuff always happens. It's a missed block. It's the hole wasn't there. The play didn't develop. It was strong. Whatever the case may be, it seems to be the same pattern over the last 3 years with this guy. And I tell you, every time I see it, it just makes me sick to my stomach. I can't stand it. But you know I'm Mark Clark, baby, and I give it to you straight with no chaser on the Sports Parade Magazine podcast. And remember, hit me up at Mark's World or at Sports Parade Mag. And remember, Sports Parade Mag and Mark Clark give it to you straight with no chaser, baby. We'll be back at you tomorrow with the Sports Parade Magazine podcast.